says go. So good morning, everybody. Get out of bed. It's time. Check the fridge for breakfast. Tim and I have soup and meatballs on the menu. So pull up a chair, hang out with us for a little bit. And it's Sunday again. It's not our usual day, but there's a reason for that. My son is in the marching band, and they played a Saturday afternoon game. So while some of the college football was going on, I was getting a red face. I don't know if you could tell as much. I need better lighting down here.
I'll need my glasses.
But the sun was beating down in Harrisburg, let me tell you. And my school did pretty well the first quarter, but the heat got to them. They got a little tired as the defense wears down, and Harrisburg took a win. But the band did really good. So shout out to the Trojan marching band. And you know what? The Harrisburg band they're always one of my favorite other team bands. They jam out. They do.
When I was covering football around here, I'll give a little shout out to one of the local high school bands. I always loved the Central Columbia band. I always thought they did a fantastic job. And every August, I like to see what the theme to their playlist was going to be.
I used to think Williamsport had a good band. Do they still?
I can't remember the last time I've seen Williamsport play football. Yeah.
Well, I mean, speaking of the world of football here, let's get right into it. So it's a Sunday. We can actually react instead of predict. And I mean, the biggest college game, I looked at the schedule and I thought, man, there's not a lot of big games to talk about. I thought Alabama, Wisconsin just because of names, but did you see Kentucky, Georgia?
I did not.
I saw the first half, and then I came downstairs to play video games with the kids. Kentucky had a lead at halftime over the number 1 Georgia Bulldogs. And then when we were done playing video games, Georgia had come back. And I watched the last 2 minutes with Georgia up 13-12. And I mean, Georgia escaped. We'll put it that. I mean, Kentucky played them super hard. And if you don't have a team in the fight, I think you default and root for the underdog.
Oh, absolutely.
You want to see number 1 go down. But I mean, Kentucky, they were down 13-12, and they stopped Georgia. But Georgia was able to run the clock down to like 9 seconds before they punted. And it looked like they pinned Kentucky at the 5, but then there was a touchback or something. Either way, Kentucky couldn't do the clock operator. I think they stopped the game 3 times in the last 9 seconds to just double check the clock. And there was no drama at the end. I mean, Georgia was out on top.
All the games I saw yesterday were fairly undramatic because I watched Michigan, and Michigan was not good enough where I feel good about Michigan, but it wasn't a close enough game to be like dramatic.
The turnovers, and did they bench the quarterback?
I mean, because I had to leave for a little bit in the second half. If they didn't, they should have. He had one interception that he threw under heavy pressure, where he rolled to his right and then tried to throw it all the way across, not quite an out, but still like a throw where you need like elite arm strength. And it like as soon as it left his hand, I was like, that's a pick. I
didn't see any of the game. I got one highlight from the Harrisburg game of Mullings scoring a rushing touchdown, which hasn't happened much this year for Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, the running game looked fantastic. They could do whatever they wanted. They were, I didn't see what they ended up running for, but you could tell that they wanted to get some game reps, for the passing game to get on the same page.
It's Arkansas State.
Right.
So it's one of those, you expect to be able to do what you want on the ground. The 10-point win, I mean, the fourth quarter was not good. I mean, just looking over the box score, because again, I'm not at the not watching it, they had 301 rushing yards, and they held Arkansas to 58. That's including the sacks, obviously. But the turnovers will kill you. The penalties, seven penalties, probably at bad times.
The defense couldn't get off the field on third down in the first half. That was concerning.
You really need to clean stuff up because USC is coming to town next week, and USC is not Arkansas State.
Yeah. And look, Michigan led 21-3 in the second quarter, and if they had wanted to run it 50 times, they could have won 48-10. I'm sure of it. But
they probably should.
It was smart to work on the passing game. It was smart to maybe be a little vanilla on offense with USC, on deck. But I don't feel great about this Michigan season.
Well, you know what? Coming into the season, you had we've been spoiled over the last couple years. Not a ton of losses. The first regular season loss last weekend in a long time, and you lose so much from last year's team, including the quarterback, and it doesn't appear that we have a quarterback. And that's something that, whether it's in the transfer portal or, if there's the top quarterback recruit in high school coming in, I don't know if that's the answer, but they need to have a signal caller, or you're going to have a string of 3 and 4 losses for a while.
It was the kind of game where when it was over, I was like, I wish I'd watched a different game. Like I should have watched like Alabama, Wisconsin, which I caught the tail end of, even though not that
sitting with my dad at the game. My dad's a big Alabama fan, as you know, and Wisconsin had a 3-0 lead when we got to the stadium. And by the time we sat down, I think it was 21-3 Alabama.
Yeah, it was all downhill from there. Yeah, and even like I watched Oregon State, and that was Oregon looked fantastic though, especially in the second half when they pulled away. Their offense looked tremendous. I mean, did you see the run by Arch Manning for
the 76-yarder?
Yeah,
weaving in and out. Yeah,
he.
I was going to say Texas had a really big offensive output. I mean, against San Antonio, who's a up-and-coming NBA team, not much of a college football team, though.
Wembanyama would be a great receiver. Show me the cornerback who's going to guard a 7'5" Frenchman.
Throw the jump ball in the corner of the end zone and have him just go up in one hand at like Moss people. Sure. No, but yeah, Texas looks tough. Tennessee just laid over 70. I still like. I like Oregon and probably Ohio to, be contenders for the Big Ten. I think Michigan and Penn State are probably the next row down. I don't know beyond that what the Big Ten has. It was strange. Both Penn State and Ohio were off yesterday, so you didn't get to see them.
I think nationally, I would have Texas as. If I had a vote, I would have Texas as my number
right
one.
Here.
Well, then give me Texas.
You're voting Texas one right now.
So my top three would be. I like Texas. I like Ohio State as maybe number 2 or number 3, and then Alabama's. If Ohio State's 3, Alabama's 2. I wasn't sold on Georgia coming into Ohio,
but I think Alabama. If they keep running the ball, with the way they can run the ball, they're a dangerous team. They really are. And I think, notwithstanding what happened last night, it's tough to discount Georgia. But yeah, I mean, Texas at number 1. You're not going to get a lot of arguments, at least not from me.
And the point was made 1,000 times in the Michigan game. I mean, Texas has a great offensive line. They might have the Heisman, like the early Heisman favorite in Quinn Ewers.
You're not going to see Texas challenged the next 2 weeks. October 12th, when Oklahoma comes for the Red River Shootout. I think Texas wins that game probably like handily, like by at least 2 scores. But then the big one, October 19th, when Georgia comes to town, that might be a 1 versus 2 matchup, and a really big game in the middle of the season. But big in that it'll be fun to watch. It'll be fun to talk about. But both teams are still probably making the playoffs.
Right, it truly could be a preview of the national championship game.
Yeah, depending on where they slot in the bracket. So, yeah, good things coming down the pike in Division I. Now in Division II, our home schools, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Bloomsburg. I watched the IUP game on Lock Haven TV, and IUP held on. Like they had a 20-10 lead, but they had a lot of people hurt in the first half. They had to bring in like their backup quarterback, and with a 10-point lead with like 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Lock Haven got an 80-yard touchdown pass. So now the lead is 20-17. Excuse me. And IUP was able to run the clock and get Lock Haven down. And they punted. They got Lock Haven inside their own 10, and Lock Haven couldn't come back and score. So 2017, the win for IUP. IUP's knocked off Lock Haven in their last 35 meetings. I didn't know that until I saw this on the broadcast. The last time the Bald Eagles beat IUP, 1981. So we were alive. I was alive for it. I think you were.
Yeah, I would have been 2 years old.
Yeah, that was those were good days of whatever I was doing when I was 3.
Watching a lot of He-Man.
Yeah. Did you and you saw what happened with Bloomsburg? This was tough.
Yeah, they were up late. They gave up 2 scores in the final 9 minutes, and they lost a tough one to Seton Hill. Seton Hill came in 0-2, and the way that BU played against Fairmont in the opener, you kind of felt like BU might be able to handle Seton Hill. So to lose like that, and to give up those touchdowns because of stupid penalties, because a couple of personal foul penalties kept drives alive.
I paint the picture for you at the end. The last play was a 4th and 2 with 9 seconds left, and they Seton Hill threw a pass in the back corner of the end zone, and it looked like the guy was all by his lonesome. I don't think anyone was near him for Bloomsburg coverage breakdown, and that put Seton Hill up 15-14, 9 seconds left. That's a tough way to drop a game. Like you said, that they were winning, was it 14-3, you said?
14-3, yeah.
14-3 at some point. So with those games in the book, Bloomsburg at 1-1 and IUP at 2-0. They had a big win on the road at Ashland last Thursday. These are conference standings. So, if you look at it and you say, like, why is Shippensburg ranked ahead of East Stroudsburg? That's just the way the PSAC put it together. So Slippery Rock still, I think, the favorite in the West. And I forget who the preseason favorite was in the East. I see a lot of East Stroudsburg on TikTok, but I don't think it was East Stroudsburg.
I want to say, if I'm remembering correctly, that like it was pretty evenly split. That like it was like 3 first place votes for the team that was number 1. I can't remember who. It might have been Kutztown, and then like 3 for the team that ended up second in the poll. There was no consensus. The only consensus seemed to be that Bloomsburg was going to be bad.
They were down, yeah.
They were last in the East. And I think Bloomsburg's exceeding expectations, but not nearly what they would have 10 or 15 or 20 years ago.
Kutztown, the odds-on favorite, they had 6 first-place votes.
Oh,
Shepherd and East Stroudsburg, preseason poll now.
Yeah.
Slippery Rock was the odds-on favorite still out west. IUP got 1 first-place vote, and that's only because you can't vote for yourself. So Slippery Rock voted for that.
Right.
So, I mean, going forward, we'll keep you, the Soup and Meatball viewer, abreast of what's going on in the PSAC Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference and all that good stuff. But, the thing about being live on a Sunday now, we talk NFL, and today in the NFL, Kansas City, Cincinnati, probably the big game of the weekend. Your Eagles, Tim, they're 6-point favorites on Monday. They got Atlanta.
Right.
The Bears are dogs on the road, but only 6 to Houston.
Yeah, the first thing I do most mornings is I look at the local paper for the TV listings to see like who's going to be on what channels. And I saw that like I would have to watch, I forget who the Jets have. They're the early CBS game. The Giants Commanders are the early Fox game.
The Giants Commanders is just why are we getting that?
Yeah, like it might be a good day to just like watch like The Office reruns.
Yeah. The Jets have they're at Tennessee.
That's right.
And yeah, the Jets are 4-point favorites in that one. Tampa Bay at Detroit. I mean, Detroit's an 8-point favorite in that one, but I mean, don't sleep on Baker.
I thought now I saw highlights, but I thought Baker Mayfield looked really good in the opener.
I do too. And speaking of the opener, like Arizona's big win, all of a sudden Arizona's a 1-point favorite on the road against the Rams. So
they're a road favorite against. Well, if I'm going to bet on a game today, I know which one I'm betting on. Give me.
And I don't know if the Rams have anybody injured or what that situation. Oh no, I'm sorry, I lied. I'm a terrible person. A, it's at Arizona, and B, now the line is even as far as ESPN goes. I was looking at a Vegas sports book when I was looking at lines, and I was looking yesterday. So I mean, the betting got them within even, but they're in Arizona.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if Vegas is buying in on Kyler Murray or if they're just trying to move the money different ways.
That's what Vegas does, yeah.
Yeah. But I haven't seen any significant injury news other than Christian McCaffrey might go on the IR.
Yeah, I mean,
and obviously Tua.
That's a great segue, because the big news of the NFL was really last Thursday. The Bills win 31-10 at Miami, but Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, 3rd concussion, 4th overall if you go back to his Alabama days. And it was really scary if you saw him laying on the ground with the arm thing.
Yeah.
Tim, what are your thoughts on that?
It just makes you sick to see, just on a human level, someone have to go through that. And you know that an athlete at that level, like the kind of competitive pride, he's going to want to come back. And he really needs people around him. And I think he's got a great person in his coach who's telling him, think of your family, talk to your doctors.
The coach is saying this, which is so rare,
right?
Because it's like job on the line.
Yeah, and I think the Dolphins always haven't done right by Tua when it came to his head injuries, and I think Mike McDaniel legitimately has his best interests at heart, and I think he really needs to consider. He's 26 years old. He's had 3 concussions in 18 months.
That's an insane amount. And this one, I mean, so looking at it, it didn't look like it wasn't helmet to helmet.
No.
It looked like his neck jarred more than it because he ran into DeMar Hamlin of all people. But it was the neck kind of jarred back. It didn't look as bad as like when his helmet cracked on the ground and he bounced a couple times. One of the ones from, I think it was 2022. Those looked bad. But this is, like you said, this is his 3rd in the last 18 months. At some point, you have to consider the long-term damage that this is doing.
Yeah, and, it's interesting how, like, for a casual fan, like, they think of, like, a receiver going over the middle and getting leveled by a safety. Like, the big, like, highlight reel hits, like, has to be the worst hit you can take. And that's not necessarily always true. Like sometimes it's, I got a concussion playing sandlot football because the ground was frozen and my brother just fell full weight on my head. That was all it took.
That's and when you talked about, because we're going to talk about personal injuries here in a little bit, but you talked about the Dolphins have not always been right by Tua. I read an article, and I'll give credit here, Jason Clinkscales, Jacob Feldman from the website Sportico. On Friday, they wrote, the incident has put a new spotlight on the 4-year, $212 million contract that Tua signed, had the $167 million in guaranteed money. Here's the thing. If he's medically cleared to play, but he chooses to retire, he gives up the $124 million guaranteed that's left on the contract. If there's no settlement, but he's medically forced to retire, he gets all the guaranteed money. So according to what they had, $43 million has already been paid out in guaranteed money. Players oftentimes have to return some of the portions of that money if they retire early. You remember, though, back in 2022, they were criticized for how they handled these injuries, and the Dolphins called it a back injury, and they cleared him to play, and he went out and got another concussion. I don't know if the Dolphins can handle the PR if they clear him to play just to save this money. But if I don't know what the cap hit is if Tua retires and they have to pay off that money. And I hate to be even thinking about the business end of things, but I mean, it's been a couple of days, and a lot of the concern for his health is obviously out there, and it's out there for us too. But now thinking from the Dolphins' perspective, if that goes against the cap, this is going to set them back for 5 years at least.
And I think it could rise to the level of being a players' association issue in the next collective bargaining agreement.
How long do we have till this? Do you know?
I don't know when the next contract's up.
We'll look that up.
If this were any other workplace, it would be an OSHA violation.
Yeah.
To say, look, 40% of the people who work here suffer traumatic brain injuries. We want you back within a few days. And if not, we don't pay you. That would be a class action lawsuit.
What you're contractually guaranteed to get.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which I think back when the Dolphins extended this contract, a lot of people because they were considering his injury history. It's not like these concussions just sprang up and surprised Miami when they offered the contract to him. This was after those 2 concussions.
Right, but here's the thing, and it should factor into every negotiation. Every football player has a concussion history.
Yeah.
If you don't want to pay a guy who's had concussions, then don't pay anyone. Just fold up the team.
Yeah. Because I mean, you're good at segueing today. I mean, we can segue this. We could have almost done this as a top 5 today. We're not going to. We have a different top 5, but you and I have both participated in youth athletics and maybe older athletics as we got older. And I could give you a top 5 of my injury history, but you wanted to talk about some of the things that dinged you up. I know some of them. I actually told one of my students about it the other day. What are some creaks and cracks you have at your old age?
So I think I've broken my right index finger 6 times.
You sent me the picture. I knew you had a weird thing with your hand because you said you could throw a screwball. When we used to go to the playground and play baseball, you could do weird stuff because your finger was like crooked.
Yeah, and now like when it rains, I don't know if it's like early on like arthritis.
Oh no, I got you.
But like I feel it. Like I
feel
can't
the moisture in the air. Yeah.
Like my finger like locks in place, and like I just can't do, like if I'm holding something, I'm just stuck holding it for an hour until the storm passes.
Are you mostly right-handed? Like, do you write right-handed? Do you eat right-handed?
I'm mostly ambidextrous.
Okay.
I can only play guitar left-handed actually.
Oh, so you're like okay.
Yeah, I'm more dominant left-handed, but I do write with my right hand. Only because when I was in school, like in the 80s, there were only like 4 left-handed desks per classroom.
Yeah.
So they're like, Timmy Hare, can you write with your right hand? Then you're going to write with your right hand. But I can still write with my left hand, just not as well. I write like a toddler.
So my biggest injury, and I'm sure you
Oh,
know
I
about
know what
this.
it is.
I actually have some medical proof here,
Oh,
because this came recently. I have metal. You see the arrow there. I have metal in both my wrists from prior injuries, and a couple years ago, I was experiencing like a plethora of pain in my right hand, and my fear was that the pin that was in there was expanding or something, because
right.
just like when it rains or it's humid, I feel it, and it's uncomfortable, but I've gotten past it. Like I feel the weather, but like it's not to the point where like, well, I can't go to work today.
Right.
Not at least.
I I
But
don't
I
know if you.
X-rayed, and I saw, hey, look at that. That's a cool picture that I show people that, yeah, I'm bionic.
I don't know if I've ever told you about this one, but I was playing basketball like outside of my house, and
The Tim backboard.
yes,
Classic.
I was playing against Matt, my oldest brother,
Huh?
and he grabbed a rebound and he was kind of like hunched over and he came up with his head and he hit
Ooh.
me. And my mom was a nurse and she was like, Timmy, there's a very good chance that you fractured your eye socket.
Oh, he popped you in the eye. Okay.
Yeah, he broke my glasses. He cut.
Do you have a cut there because of the glass?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the lens broke. So I had to go to the hospital. I had to get a facial x-ray. I had to get stitches. And I did have a concussion from that.
Cool. So, I mean, my number two will go with a hospital trip. And the best part of this, I almost wish my dad was here for this one. He's indisposed right now. And, shout out to Big Bob. You were there for this one as well. You remember we were in 10th grade at the Y, and I went up for a rebound, and I came down on a basketball, and I rolled. My ankles naturally roll anyway, and my left ankle rolled to the point where I could put zero weight on it. I don't think you carried me off the court, but at the very least, I had my arm around you, and you were like a crutch for me. And I sent you across the street to Wendy's, and I told you, tell Ray that Max needs ice. And you must have given it to somebody. Gave you ice because you came back with it.
Also, like they wouldn't have given it to me anyway. Ice is free. It's just cold water.
I have a buddy at the Y. He broke his ankle. Can you help? No. And then I got to we called my dad, and I don't think my dad came. For some reason, I think my grandfather came to pick me up and take me to the hospital, because I remember calling my dad from the hospital, like in the OR. Now, you're a dad. I'm a dad. Put yourself in that position. Your kid calls you from the ER. What's your first feeling?
Well, because you were driving at that age, I'd be worried it was a serious car accident.
You said the word worried. My dad was mad.
Toughen up those ankles. We're gonna get you some whole milk.
He was so mad. I don't know if he was just having a bad day that day, but I remember this. He was cursing on the phone about it. Like, I didn't want to hurt myself. I don't like this. I had hurt myself so much because this was back. I mean, this was after the wrist injuries. The wrist injuries started in 8th grade, and it was both my wrists. Neither one of them properly healed.
The ankle was pre-wrist surgery, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was 95. So this was 94. I consistently hurt my hands, though, and I was consistently complaining about being in pain because I didn't have a bone in there. So when my dad gets a call from the ER, he's like, "What now?" Because, like, China doll over here, you look at me, I break. But I hurt my ankles twice each. And it was just last year. I got my first walking boot last year. And you'll never guess how I hurt myself. Walking.
Well, I was going to ask if your father yelled at you again.
No. I think my wife yelled at me because the story there was we were at a fundraiser for the marching band, and I was walking across the high school parking lot, and I had told her, said, you don't have to come. They were like selling ice there, and they were loading up the truck with some stuff to donate. And I said, no, the ice truck is going to be here only for about another 20 minutes. So by the time you get here and you get our girl out of don't worry about it. But then I fell in the parking lot walking across, like they have this curb and like a tree that separates the cars going in both directions. And I stepped into like the mulch and my foot rolled and I went down, and it was my right foot. So I couldn't drive.
Yeah.
And I was in a walking boot for 2 weeks. And it was an interesting feeling. I'd never had a boot before. It was always an air cast.
Right. I've been lucky. The only like lower limb injury I really had, I had a hip pointer, but that's
Okay.
I'm thinking more like below the knee. I broke the big toe on my right foot in a basketball game because someone just came down like heel first.
And there's nothing you can do there. There's no
Yeah,
cast. There's no. It's
because
just
my mom
literally.
was like, "Let's get it X-rayed," and I was like, "What are they gonna do? You don't splint a toe. They don't have tiny little casts for the toe."
He's cute. Now, what about your knees? That's what I was
My-
telling my kids about. Like your knees, you used to be able to pick your knee cap up and like jiggle it. That's
I still can.
don't.
And yeah, now like when I get out of a chair, I was saying this to my other brother Dave yesterday because he came up to visit, and I stood up and I said to him, every time I stand up, it sounds like a pickup truck backing up over a gravel like driveway, like it just.
I remember a couple years ago. So I'm helping a student with something. I'm sitting next to her and we're on the computer. We're doing the stuff, and we're done. Okay, cool. I stand up, and it just sounds like you're stepping on pretzels. And she looks at me. She's like, "Was that you?" I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "You'll get old someday too." And that gets to the point where they're like, "How old are you?" And I straight up lie. I'm like 86.
See, I always go the other way where I'm like, would you believe it? I finally turned 21.
Nice. I should try that too. Then I pull out the old Indiana Jones quote. It's not the years, it's the miles.
An
Because
improvised line, by the way. Harrison Ford made that up in the moment.
this discussion here just it proves it's the miles. You said Matt gave you a concussion inadvertently.
And Dave.
Do you have an idea of how many concussions you think you may have had? Because when we grew up, they didn't care about it.
So I had 2 confirmed, and then I had one from high school football from practice where I was like, we were going live for some reason. It was 11th grade. I can't remember why we were going live. And
You went live all the time.
I was like running like a little like drag over the middle, and I got absolutely ear holed.
Do you
And
remember
like
who did it?
Mike Chickalise.
Oh, he is a big guy too.
Yeah. And so like if you obviously you remember Coach K, Mark Koskolitz.
Yep.
He was like go stand off to the side. We're gonna he was like, we're not gonna have you do any more reps today.
But it's nice of him for you. I'm going to go back. When I was 9 years old, I got ear holed in a little league baseball game, and that's back pre-face mask and like the helmets were kind of jiggly.
Yeah.
That was definitely one. In a PAL basketball game, I went up for a rebound, and a kid grabbed me by the back of my jersey and pulled.
I was at this game. I know he did it.
Back of my skull, and I was dizzy. And then we were going to take me to the hospital. Then I remember leaving the gym, and then when I got out in the cold air, I was like, "Oh, I feel okay. Can I go play again?" And my dad was like, "Yeah, sure, go play."
Yeah, my mom, she just had the nursing kit, and she would get the flashlight for the eyes to make sure the pupils were dilating.
Sure. But then football for me as well. 10th grade, I can remember it was week 3. We just played Wyoming Valley West, and I cracked my head a bunch of times there. And then the Tuesday when we did varsity defense, I was the scout team tailback, and not only did we run, whoever we were playing that week, we'll call it Tunkhannock because who else is going to know, that just so much running. Then we did the goal line drill, and that's what rung my bell. So many goal line carries where, big defensive tackles like Bugda and Petrovic, and this was back when Brian Martonic was still on the team. Like these guys, they hit and they hit hard, and I was dumb. I'd put my head down and.
And you said something there that when it's a generational thing, but when we were playing, and obviously before us, people had these euphemisms to hide what really happened. You got your bell rung. Oh, you
Yeah,
got your eggs scrambled. No, I suffered a deep bruise to my brain.
my brain is now swelling, and to the point where, in 11th grade when it happened, yeah, I mean, taking the next step in, like, Tylenol or Advil before practice was not good as an 11th grade. Like, I'm not going to play Division I football. I'm certainly not going to be in the pros. What are you doing? And now, and a couple of years later, I don't know if you experienced this. I'll walk into rooms sometimes and be like, what was I doing here? The only room that
I do
doesn't
that, but I think it's just an old age thing for me.
that, I mean, it doesn't help though.
You know, and you make another point where neither of us were like Hall of Famers. Like, I was not a good high school football player. I would not describe myself as one. So how many concussions do you think a guy like Tua has had coming up
Yeah.
that weren't severe, that they were what we would consider a lower end concussion?
Tua would have been, I have to imagine he was at least a 4-star quarterback in Hawaii. I don't know how many hits he would have taken. And back in high school, I don't know if he would have played defense, because that's the only time I think he would have been hit. I think, maybe one in high school,
Right.
unless he played defense and he hit really hard. That's where he would have hurt himself.
Even just like a guy at his level, like who plays high school,
Running
college,
back,
pro.
running backs or linemen or people who are more likely to have collisions, yes, significantly higher than a guy like Tua or, the other big name quarterbacks like Mahomes or Josh Allen was a big guy. I could see him like running the option in high school and just putting his head down.
And he plays a reckless style. Like, you can see it now in the NFL where he's diving head first. He does not slide.
And that's what happened with Tua. If he had slid feet first, and you don't know if that would have been avoided. But
do they need more rules to like change like the number of like hits that a quarterback's going to take when he's out of the pocket? Like, I truly don't know what the answer is.
I don't think changing the rules just for quarterbacks is going to change anything, because I think the guardian cap is a good step. I think that has to get some widespread acceptance, because I think it was TJ Watt came out and said, I'd never wear one of those. But that's like a manly thing, right? Like we talked about when we were in school. I remember the last game of the year, 10th grade. Our varsity guys were done. We had one game left. The JVs did. And our buddy Chisnell decided, he's like, dude, we should switch helmets with some of the varsity guys. I'm like, yeah, okay. So I took Brian Martonik's helmet because it had a cool face mask and there was paint all over it. We thought it looked cool. See, we didn't clean our helmets back then.
Right.
So like we would have, blue stripes from Berwick and red stripes from Coughlin. And it would
pride stickers.
Yeah. And like, I remember Chisnell would get super excited when his face mask had chips out of it. Like, that was a source of pride back then that we had cracked our heads against somebody else. So I don't know if that kind of mentality has to get weaned out before the guardian caps can have some more widespread acceptance.
I don't think it's going to get weaned out, though, because it's such a macho culture. Like, hockey goalies didn't wear masks until the 70s because of this. They were like, no, I'm not wearing one of those. It was a source of pride.
Yeah.
I'm sure Bronco Nagurski thought face masks were for wimps. It has to come from the league. It has to be a mandated thing. It can't be a player choice. Same with how they have to have, like the independent medical personnel say, we're taking your helmet away from you. Because no player is going to say, no, I don't want to play.
Who said that? Was that Paterno? Who had said, if we took the helmets away, it would reduce head injuries because people would be less cavalier with their heads?
If it wasn't him, it was like I heard that conversation floated around the time he was still at Penn State.
For some reason, his name is coming up in my head, and somebody's watching, you can fact check me, but I'm going to say it was Joe Paterno who said that. And there's some, I think there's some truth to that. I mean, if you look at rugby, you don't hear a lot of injuries come, and you don't hear a lot of rugby, I guess, but like I have kids we have a club rugby team at the school who seem to be injured less often.
Yeah, and they're throwing people into the air in rugby and Aussie rules football. And you're right; they don't have the sort of concussion epidemic that American football has. And Canadian football too, as far as I know. I haven't seen any data on it, but you haven't heard much from Canadian football about like an epidemic of concussions.
But here's the thing: when you take the helmets away, and you see less of those big hits, the gladiatorial Romanesqueness of the American football fan, who, I mean, honestly, and maybe not proudly, we're a bloodthirsty group. Like you want to see big hits, you want to hear pads pop, and players' health be damned.
The first time
dollars in my head, I want to see them crack each other. That mentality is going to have to change, or the players are going to naturally want to provide that source of entertainment.
The first time I subscribed to Sports Illustrated as a kid, the gift for subscribing was NFL's biggest hits. And it was like, now it's just what the league office shows what you can't do. It was Chuck Cecil spearing dudes and Andre Dirty Waters taking out receivers, and I say that as like, no one should be doing that. An elite athlete who runs that fast should not be projecting himself crown first at another person's face or head.
Oh yeah, that's and players have only gotten bigger and faster since Chuck Cecil and Andre Waters too.
And also, if you take away the helmets, and this is something I hadn't considered before, people don't realize when you have a helmet on, your peripheral is compromised. You can't turn your head as well, and you have parts of the face mask that, if you don't have a helmet, you can protect yourself, head on a swivel, and see much more readily than with a helmet on.
Brace yourself more is what you're saying. Like,
well, just see what's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've had a helmet on, but you're not wrong about moving your head side to side. And here's the other thing: if you've never played football and you've never put a helmet on and hit something with it, it still hurts a lot if you put a helmet with somebody at a reasonable speed. Like I was no speedster, but when I played fullback, if I ran into somebody else's head, it hurt. Before the games, Giselle and I would crack our heads a couple times just to get the first hit out of the way, get that initial headache out of the way so that you could hit something during the game. That was a thing. Get the headache out of the way.
Yeah.
Because it hurts to get hit in the head. The protection isn't really protection.
But teenage boys are kind of conditioned to think that they're supposed to just suck it up and deal with it. Yeah, I mean, where did you learn about hitting your head against Giselle? From the movie The Program.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what we did.
It seeps through the culture.
Because we wanted to look cool. And I wanted to get the headache out of the way.
Well, yeah, but at what cost?
It's amazing that was the thought process. Like the first time I hit something, my head is going to pop. There's going to be some white there, which reminds me, another concussion. I almost forgot this. 12th grade, there was a running back from East Stroudsburg named James Mungro. James Mungro went on to play in the NFL. Really good running back.
Syracuse and the Colts. Yep.
Pennsylvania rushing leader for a long time until Austin Scott broke his record. Well, anyway, Mungro's coming around on a toss. I was playing corner at the time, and I got rid of my wide receiver, and I broke down like you're taught, and I put my head was up. I didn't dip my head. Forehead on his thigh.
Oh, yeah.
And he knocked me silly. Like, I think the guys were joking. They're like, you didn't tackle him. He tripped over you. I went through his legs. I tackled him. I don't remember the next two plays. Like, you remember if you ever had a pillow fight and you got the pillow to the face and your eyes go white for a second? I saw the gates of heaven. My eyes went so white. And like the next two plays, I was in a fog.
I had one like that in a JV game against Tunkhannock where someone's knee like hit me in the face mask, but like my face mask like came back. Like I thought my nose was broken, and I just got that taste in my mouth of like that metallic taste of like when you have a bloody nose. Like it tasted like I had a mouthful of pennies.
Yeah.
You know. But then like a teammate grabbed me by the collar. Come on,
Get up.
hit it. Next play.
And like you said, we were gloriously mediocre. I tell the kids I used to coach, I was gloriously mediocre. I would put my head where it didn't belong. And we started teaching heads up tackling and, not cracking your heads. But then in the middle of games, guys are guys. And when you're going 100 miles an hour, helmets crack. And that's in 8th grade. I saw concussions that were actually then diagnosed. Like our trainers started looking for things, pulling kids out of practice, pulling kids out of games. And then we had a whole protocol that we had to go through. I remember during preseason, they took a baseline test. I forget what this test was called. There was a name for it. But they took a test. And then whenever, there was even a risk of concussion, they would take the test again. And it would test reaction time. And, things like that. And that's how they would diagnose you with, a grade 1 or grade 2 or whatever it was. And the trainer would be like, look, this guy's inactive for at least 2 weeks before we can test him again. And we're like, okay, that's just the way it is. As a coach, you had to deal with it.
And, the hope is that medical science will catch up where there can be CTE testing on living players that doesn't currently exist. But yeah, I just think so much of this has to come from the league, and I don't think the league has shown that they want to do anything about it until they have to absolutely do something about it.
I think it's monetarily, and just because of what I said, the bloodthirstiness of the NFL fan. If they go to, a lot of people right now they're upset, and I'm one of them to a point. Like I'm upset about the amount of defensive. Penalties is the wrong word, like the defensive handicaps that are out there that are put in place to help the offense.
Right.
Where the NFL has become a 7-on-7 league where, they want to see scores in the 40s and 50s. If you do even more to say a defense can't do this, at some point you're going to hear, let's just make it flag football. Well, and then I think you cut your fan base at least in half.
We heard people grumble this offseason when they were talking about the hip drop tackle.
Yeah.
Where they were like, oh, well, let's just put cheerleader uniforms on them. It's like, all right, you go out there and have a 210-pound elite safety drop to the ground and let's see how your femur reacts.
Pull your hip out of its socket. Yeah. I've been banged up enough. If you give me $40 million to let somebody hit me once before I'm done, because I'm going to take one. I'm not getting up. Let's get that straight. 47 million, I might, but not being able to walk again, that's rough. Like, yeah, the ankles when it rains, or the snow actually gets my ankles more than the rain gets my hand, the snow gets my feet. 40 million is a lot, but it's not that much. But it's going to boil down to money, like you said, like I said, with fans. And you said the NFL has no real incentive to change it.
It's going to boil down to a better commissioner who has stronger convictions and actually looks out for the players, because I do not have a high opinion of Roger Goodell.
No, I would agree with that. And we'll leave her there. So what do you guys think at home? Or are we on? Tell us about your biggest injury. Like, show me an X-ray.
Doesn't have to be sports related. Maybe a trip on Little Susie's roller skates. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
Tell us how you got hurt. We love it.
We're a family show, though. There's a show on cable. Sex sent me to the ER. I don't want to hear that stuff.
I kind of do.
No,
we don't have to read them on the air. Send them to me. I'll give you my personal email.
At the very end, we'll put.
I'll give you my cell number. I want them texted. I want these immediately.
Oh my gosh, that's so bad. Okay, let's get to our draft. And so we're gonna dig into our bag of tricks here for the Soup and Meatballs draft. You came up with this one, so what are we doing here this week?
Oh, I forgot. What are we doing this week? You sent it to me, and now I'm not wearing my glasses.
Oh no, I sent you the top 5. So you said the draft was going to be our all-time favorite athletes.
Oh yes.
Right.
Oh, and I
I
texted myself these, so I do have to go hunting for them.
Okay. Well,
I wrote down my other.
I'll break it down for people. So, regardless of sport, but I said pro wrestling, no, but like Greco-Roman wrestling, yes. So, I mean, we did pro wrestling a couple weeks back, and everybody online said you won. I think that's primarily because I drafted strangely, and you got Flair. So, let's see.
I might disappear for a second. I'm going to my texts. I texted it to myself.
Okay, well, there he goes. We're now in a black screen here. That's okay. We'll get
okay.
the
cards. Let me write this down too.
So I'll
remember it.
I have 6 cards here.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so I want you to do is call out which card do you want first. You pick the number.
5.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. This card is 5 right here. Okay. So you got the color now. It's either red or black.
Yeah. I'll go Wesley Snipes again. I'll go black.
Oh, you got it this time. So top pick in the Super Meatball favorite athlete draft goes to Tim. So you are up.
So you, I think, know who my favorite athlete is.
I don't know. I've had 5 concussions.
If I told you he's the pride of French Lick, Indiana, star basketball player for the Fighting Sycamores at Indiana State, played a little ball for the Boston Celtics, Mr. Larry Joe Bird.
That's a fair pick. That's a fair pick. So we'll go Bird number 1. Now, so I made my list with athletes that I have seen play in real time, but not necessarily live at the stadium. So like no Babe Ruth, no Joe DiMaggio.
Me too.
Joe DiMaggio. And like I do with all my drafts, I have 10 in case you steal one. But I mean, I'm looking over this list, and I'm going to tell you, it's going to be hard to leave some of these guys off. I'm going to go with a player who is quite possibly the greatest athlete of our generation, or maybe any generation, Vincent Jackson.
Oh, sure.
Call him Bo, because Bo knows. Bo Jackson, number 1.
I got to see Bo Jackson live. The first baseball game I ever went to, July of 1988 at the old Yankee Stadium.
Did he rob a home run or hit a home run?
What's that?
Did he rob a home run or hit a home run?
He robbed Jack Clark of a home run in the 7th inning.
I knew it was one of those two. Him gunning down, I want to say it was Harold Reynolds, so I will.
Yeah,
him
the old Kingdom.
Harold Reynolds from left field, and like he was like in the 5th row of the stands when he made this throw. And Harold Reynolds was not slow.
He was a 60 stolen base guy. He was a stolen base league leader when that meant something.
And the look on Reynolds' face when he was called out at the plate was like, what just happened?
I love how when Reynolds got thrown out on that play, the umpires didn't even have the plate covered because they didn't think the plate was going to be in play for it.
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
What a throw that was.
Yeah, Bo Jackson's a good one. My second, we mentioned him last week. You were surprised I didn't take him on my defense. Weapon X. Give me Brian Dawkins.
Brian Dawkins, number 2. Cool.
Yep.
I mean, so
my favorite football player. Loved watching Dawkins.
Because we're going favorites here, I don't think we're going to steal too many of each other's. So, I mean, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I only picked 5 that I texted to myself because I was like, there's no way we're going to.
There's no way. You know what? I made a list of Pennsylvania professional athletes that don't bother me. Like living in Pennsylvania, living in and around Eagles fans, Penn State fans, going to school near Steeler fans, I grew to greatly dislike a lot of those teams. I came up with a list of 10 players that played in Pennsylvania that I didn't that I could actually root for, and Dawkins was one of them, just because he was just so good.
He's one of those guys like Ed Reed. Like, I'm not a Ravens fan, but if I see an Ed Reed highlight, I'm gonna be like, my God, was he a great safety?
And you know what? If I had to rank Pennsylvania teams that in sports that I care about, I don't watch the NHL, so I don't care about the Flyers and Penguins. Like those fans, they that's heavy. But like the Eagles don't bother me because when they play, the Bears just haven't been good for the last 20 years, so I didn't care as much. But when I was in school, the Bears were like slightly mediocre, and the Steeler fans were trying to tell me that Cordell Stewart was the best quarterback in the NFL. Like that kind of mindset was just like mind blowing to me. Like, how can you think that? So Dawkins, I have no problem with Dawkins. My number 2 is, I mean, I'm now stretching the term athlete a little, because what they do is athletic to a point where I couldn't do it, but everybody does it. In a world where, people run and jump and do all this kind of stuff, some people do it better. Some people do it better, but in a world where everybody eats, I'm taking Joey Chestnut, because gosh darn it, he just, I used to love watching him on the 4th of July. My wife got into it. And it's a grotesque thing to watch, the hot dog eating contest, but I don't care.
I get reflux just thinking about it.
I am just, it's a train wreck. I cannot look away. At
your absolute food eating peak, like in your 20s or whatever, how many hot dogs do you think you could eat in 12 minutes?
So if we're eating it the same way he does,
which is gross, dunking them in the water,
cramming the dogs in, 10, 12, 14.
I think I could do 20. Like in my 20s, I think I could knock down 20 of them.
I think going too fast, I would have a reversal.
Right.
I mean, because my stomach maybe it's not as bad as yours, but it's not good. Let's get that straight.
Oh yeah, I couldn't even eat 2 hot dogs now.
I would have liked to seen this rule enacted. Number 1, you have to eat the hot dog like a hot dog. It's got to be in the bun. 2, you have to have at least 2 condiments. If you want to have ketchup, that's cool. I'm not going to judge. I like ketchup on a hot dog. You have to have 2 condiments minimum. And here's the thing. Once you finish a hot dog, a timer starts. You have 40 seconds to breathe, take a drink, whatever you want to do. But if you do not start eating another hot dog within 40 seconds, you're done.
I like those.
One at a time, and you have to eat them like regular people. I would like to see how many he could eat in that format.
And this is why World Competitive Eating needs a commissioner who cares about the contestants. Max Gemelli for hot dog eating commissioner.
You know what though? You know what the best part of that competition is? I don't know the guy's name,
hot dogs are great.
The guy who does the introductions at Coney
Michael
Island.
Buffer?
No. There's see now you're gonna make me look it up. So give me a second.
Okay.
Coney Island hot dog eating announcer dude. George Shea.
Okay.
You'll look this guy up. George Shea. I think he's what drew my wife in, because his introductions are so over the top and dramatic. It's like every competitor gets their own monologue.
It might as well be professional wrestling at that point.
Like, that's what it is, except it's like it's beyond like what even McMahon could come up with. George Shea is just he's amazing.
And absolutely. By the way, before I go with my next pick, we're definitely going to have to talk about the Vince McMahon Netflix documentary that's coming out, I think, next week.
Well, let's watch it, and we'll react to it. Yeah.
My number 3, Should be no surprise here. The best pitcher of my lifetime, greatest changeup in the history of the game. Give me Pedro Martinez.
Pedro. Yeah, he wasn't going to make my list.
I almost got to see him live in his prime in 2001 at Fenway. David Cone was their 5th starter at that time. So I saw Coney pitch for the Red Sox during his brief Boston window. And then Pedro the next day was the starter. And then he injured his rotator cuff, and he was never quite the same. He had that peak from 97 to 02.
His 97
to 01.
His 99 year, I think, was the best pitching year either one of us would have ever seen in our life. I'm
still actively angry that he lost the MVP to Ivan Rodriguez.
Yeah. Now, I mean, the thing about Pedro, he was the kind of guy that you loved having on your team, and attitude-wise, you hated going against. But I think, back when the Yankees Red Sox games were they meant something, either in the playoffs or fighting for the division near the end. Derek Jeter said something about him that was he loved the competition that Pedro brought, and the attitude that he had, being an old school guy. But Pedro was funny. Pedro was the kind of guy who's yeah, they beat me. Call me their daddy, or call them my daddy, whatever it was. And when this chant started, who's your daddy in Yankee Stadium, he didn't even care. He's you know what? I'm in your heads now. You just think about me. And that's how he thought. And he's actually one of my favorite. I haven't watched. I don't think he's on MLB anymore. But when he was on MLB, he was one of my favorite analysts.
Me too. I loved how he would break down the mechanics of pitching, and even just setting up hitters, pitch sequences. It was a great insight into a great baseball mind.
Yeah. So we never saw Pedro. I don't think we saw Pedro against my number 3. I doubt it. I bet you my number 3 would have retired by then. And he's the hardest luck story in all of New York sports history, because he showed up the year after the Yankees won the World Series, and he retired the year before they won the World Series. But for that time in between, he was the undisputed king of New York. And when he came back for Old Timers Day, the 10-minute applause that he got hurt my arms, but I didn't want to stop, because Don Mattingly deserved all the applause he was getting. Mattingly was the Yankees in those tough times in the 80s, and he's my number 3.
Even as a Red Sox fan, I loved watching Mattingly in the 80s. I can still remember summer 87 when he was 8 straight games that he homered to break Dale Long's record.
Yeah, and then Griffey tied it.
Yeah, because the Yankees, when I lived in Jersey, they were always on WPIX.
Yep.
So I was always getting
up in Northeast PA with my dad too.
Yeah,
cool
I loved watching him.
Run wise, Don Mattingly in one year, whatever year it was, hit 6 grand slams. But those are the only grand slams he ever hit in his career.
And his 1985 season, he hits 353 and wins the MVP. And this isn't even talking about his defense. An unreal defensive player.
Absolutely.
One of the 3 great defensive third basemen of all time. Him, Hernandez, and whoever I'm forgetting. Gil Hodges, maybe. He was great.
Well, certainly not David Ortiz or Frank Thomas or Jason Giambi. They're not making the list.
No, Mattingly's a good pick. And Mattingly, like Bo Jackson, one of the cool all-time sports posters, because Bo had the one with the shoulder pads where he's holding the bat. Mm-hmm. And Mattingly had the one, the Hitman, where he's in a
the Al Capone Tommy gun.
The pinstripe suit. My next one, I'm going back to the Eagles. I would put my Mummers outfit on, but it's at the cleaners, so I'm just going to have to go with Jason Kelce. We'll just have to live with memories of him talking to the crowd at the Super Bowl rally in his Mummers outfit. One of the great personalities in the modern game.
That's the word I was looking for, personality. And that's where, I mean, if I'm looking at my list, there's definitely 2 that fit that bill, but they're not in my top 5, though. I mean, but, the Kelce brothers together are their characters. They might have the second best podcast on sports on the web now that we're around.
Yeah, sorry, guys. Sorry about your luck. Yeah, I love I know Travis Kelce's become a divisive guy now because he's dating Taylor Swift and he's advocated for vaccines, and that's not cool to some people who apparently want to bring polio back. What's that?
What are his thoughts on face masks and Guardian caps?
Well, let's reach out to him and see if he'll be on the podcast next week.
I'll get a hold of his people. I'll have our producer get a hold of him.
I love like the Kelseys, like Jason Kelsey and his wife, the Duchess of Delco County. Yeah, they just seem like such a cool couple together. And then he was also like a Hall of Fame center.
Down to earth people.
Yeah.
Salt of the earth people, if you will.
The saltiest and earthiest.
So I'm getting rid of some of my stomach issues. Shout out to the chalky tablet I just took. One of our soup and meatball sponsors, Tums. So
I'm a Gaviscon man.
I'll take Dapper Dawn or FOP, whatever. So my number 4, it's interesting that he's number 4 because during the 90s, I don't know who coined the term core 4, but I hate it because of the guy they leave out. Bernie Williams should absolutely be mentioned alongside the core 4 of that Yankee team. So when I played youth baseball and like teener baseball, I played a lot of center field, and Bernie was the center fielder. And center field's a special place for the Yankees, like between the big names like DiMaggio and Mantle, and Bernie was a really vital part of those teams as a switch hitter. He won the batting title one year, and I remember when his contract came up, there was concern that he was going to leave, maybe even go to Boston of all places. But they brought him back, and he was my favorite player of those teams. So I was really nervous when he left, and then even his last couple of years where the production fell way off, it bothered me because I wanted to see him hit, but he was still my favorite of those teams. So Bernie's number 4 for me, even though the whole core 4 thing kind of bugs me because they don't mention him.
And I feel like Bernie's going to get into the Hall, kind of Veterans Committee route. And he's going to maybe Harold Baines it a little bit. But if Harold Baines is in Cooperstown, I feel like Bernie's going to have his day.
There's a lot of people that probably deserve to be in, but we'll
save that for another podcast.
Yeah. Oh, that could be our top 4, top 5 of people who should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame over Harold Baines.
Poor Harold Baines. Let's invite him on too.
Who's your 5? Round us out.
So you were talking about one of the great sort of what ifs with Mattingly, where his career didn't overlap with their success in the 90s and 2000s. My number 5 is a what if because of tragedy. It's Jerome Brown from the Eagles, defensive tackle.
Wow. That's something I hadn't thought of in a while.
For my money, he was the best defensive tackle in the game before he died. It was either him or Cortez Kennedy. There's a reason why when you go to Eagles games, you see a lot of Kelly Green 99. I really think he could have been a Reggie White level defensive player.
Wow. The biggest memory I have of him, I don't know what year it was, 90, 91, when the Eagles played the Bears in the Fog Bowl. And there's video of Jerome Brown walking towards the sideline or walking towards the lock, wherever it was.
Yeah. Walking through the fog.
Clouds. And when he died, one of the channels put a package together, and they used that video at the very end before they faded to black, or they faded to white maybe because it was the video was white. I kind of get goosebumpy just thinking about how that image ended that story.
Yeah. Yeah, it died way too young. Car accident with his nephew on a rain-slicked Florida road.
Wow, that's so. I mean, my number 5 is a little happier story. Story's still going on at least, and I'm going to go to college because he's with the Rams now, but it took a lot for me to overtake Anthony Thomas as my favorite Michigan player of all time. But what this guy did on the field, and then especially off the field, with the onset of NIL, what Blake Corum would do with his NIL money and go back to his community over Thanksgiving and hand out food and things like that. If somebody can come up with something bad to say about Blake Corum, bring it, because all-time leader in Michigan touchdown rushing history, national champ. He came back for his senior year. He could have and maybe should have gone to the NFL because running backs have a shelf life. But he came back his senior year because he said he wanted to be part of something special, and then obviously was part of something special.
That was one of my favorite parts of the Michigan title was getting to see him rewarded for the decision to come back.
So I will root for him. I like seeing former Wolverines do well in the NFL. And obviously it's his rookie year. So, a lot of stuff can happen, good or bad, but Blake Corum, at least for what he did in Ann Arbor, if I have to pick my favorite athletes, I mean, he's getting lumped in there with Joey Chestnut and Bo Jackson. That's as good a company as you can get.
Well, we don't want to minimize all the good that Joey Chestnut has done for the hot dog community.
The baked sandwich, the grilled sandwich community of Coney Island. Did you hear or see he and Kobayashi did a fake hot dog, or the whatever it is
for Netflix, right?
Yeah, and he hit like 84 hot dogs, but then the comparison was like, did the ingredients matter or something? I don't know. Absolutely ridiculous.
Do you have a favorite brand of hot dog, by the way?
Whatever they sold us at Carlisle that one time. We went to that remains the best hot dog I've ever had in my life.
It was like a mini souvenir bat of beef.
It was so good. It was so good, dude. I would have paid $20. I'd have paid $20 for that. That was.
And the thing is, it was like $2.
Back in what would that have been like?
That was 92 because the Redskins. Well, the Commanders now, but Washington was coming off a Super Bowl.
Okay.
And they were playing the Steelers.
Yeah, it was in a controlled scrimmage. It's like 10 plays either way.
Yeah.
So, cool deal. So you said you only had 5.
5.
You only wrote down 5 names because I wasn't going to copy.
Oh yes.
So I didn't think you would copy my. I wondered maybe you might have took Bo. The other.
I thought we might. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm going to let you know the other 5 that made the list because one of them is another wild and wacky one. Anthony Thomas would have been number 6. Neil Anderson for the Bears was number 7. I love this guy for his outside of football contributions, I think more, but Tony Siragusa.
Oh, yeah.
Funny guy. Another guy outside of the world of sports, I want to meet this guy because I think he's a tremendous human. Shaquille O'Neal.
Okay. And
then outside the world of sports, because at 2:00 in the morning on ESPN, like back in the summers of 91 and 92, Magnus Vermagnuson, loved him.
Oh yeah, I remember you would always bring him up in high school.
He was awesome.
And my family didn't have basic cable, so I was like, "Who's this guy? Is that some sort of Nordic cheese?"
Yeah, well, he was Nordic, I'm sure. Get on YouTube and just watch old Magnus. He's not the biggest, but he was strong as heck, man.
I've since seen, like him, like wearing a compact sedan on his shoulders and like walking a quarter mile or whatever they made them do.
The spheres now they're picking bottles up and throwing them over.
Yeah, that's like CrossFit stuff.
I think CrossFit might have like evolved out of the World's Strongest Man. Yeah, but yeah, Magnus Vermagnuson would have made my list.
That's a good choice.
So there's some honorable mentions there. So segue from good TV to maybe even more good TV.
I have my list.
We're gonna
in paper form.
We're gonna the top 5 this week is in the world of entertainment. I think we're gonna rank, or at least draft, our top 5 all-time sitcom characters. So,
And now I started last time. Would you like to kick it off?
well, do you want to go 5-1?
Yeah, and I even have some honorable mentions that I was going to bring up.
I have 3 honorable mentions, but we'll go with the top 5 because that's what the graphic says.
Okay.
My number 5 is somebody that reminds me of me a little bit. I like the way he was portrayed, and near the end of the series, when we knew it was going to happen, we knew he dies, and I get sad thinking about it. I'm going to go with George Cooper, who was the father on Young Sheldon.
Oh, wow. And I completely have to admit, I never saw 1 second of that show. Like, I know who the character is, like, from, like, memes and, like, TikToks and stuff, but I never watched. And I'll tell you, I don't think my number 5, you probably, well, maybe didn't watch much of, but it was the first sitcom I really watched as a kid. But I kind of talked over you there. Why is he your number 5?
So he reminds me of me a little bit because there's parts of my son that remind me of Sheldon. My son is infinitely smarter than I am or ever will be, but his intelligence has now transformed into musical intelligence. When he was a kid, he really wanted to be an astronaut, and I think my wife and I were worried that he would be an astronaut and he'd leave this planet. That's kind of reined in. I think he's going to stick around on Earth for a while now. But I mean, so George is, as a character, he's a loving dad who tries his best at work, and sometimes he's a little bit lazy and just, I don't want to do this. I'm just going to sit in my chair, and I just liked him, and he made me smile. But in the Big Bang Theory, Sheldon, as an adult, talked about how his father died, so we knew watching Young. So it's not a spoiler that he dies. If you watch the Big Bang Theory, you know it. The episode in which he dies, and then the funeral episode, are some of it's really good writing, I think. And I'm not an award-winning writer fan. Like, it was entertaining to me. It made me emotional is the wrong word, but emotional is the right word, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Like, sometimes it's weird when you're watching a show that you don't think is going to have that tone, and then it hits you right.
It normally doesn't, because it's a sitcom.
Yeah. And then it hits you in the emotions, and you're like, oh, wow, they just added a new dimension.
That hurt.
My number 5 might surprise you, but as I mentioned, growing up, we had WPIX, and they used to show old episodes of The Honeymooners.
Okay.
And the first character who I found to be the funniest guy on TV, played by Art Carney, Ed Norton, the plumber who lived under the Cramdens on The Honeymooners.
I have seen Honeymooners as you've seen Young Sheldon.
Yeah, and there are only like 39 episodes ever made of The Honeymooners.
Really, that's it.
Yeah, well, because TV seasons were structured differently back then. But yeah, I remember when I was little, it was a big deal because they said they'd found some lost episodes of The Honeymooners, and I was like, wait, I get more Ed Norton?
They're coming out on DVD, and all you have to do is subscribe to this magazine for a year, and we'll send it to you.
And then, like, when the actor Edward Norton started to become famous, like when Primal Fear came out in the 90s, and I was like, wait, the hapless plumber? Or who are we talking about here?
Yeah.
But no, give me Art Carney as Ed Norton.
Eddie Murphy did a crude joke about Norton, and yeah, we'll leave it at that. My number 4, I remember watching the show on Saturday nights at my grandmother's house. Like, my parents would drop me off, and they would go out. Like, they'd be on a date or something. And I would sit at my grandmother's house and play with Legos, and I'd watch the Golden Girls. I loved Sophia Petrillo from the beginning. She was such a smart ass. Oh, and when somebody told me she was the youngest of the 4 later on, I was like, no, she's not. She's the oldest. Oh, she was such a wisecracking. Oh, she was great. Sophia's number 4. And As I look at my list, it's almost a crime that I didn't put her up higher, honestly.
I mean, you could put any one of the four, one of the great casts in TV history, to have, B. Arthur and Rue McClanahan and Betty White.
Dorothy's Bornak grew on me later. As I
was a
got
Dorothy
older
guy.
and more like irritable, I feel more like Dorothy. Rose, I'd like to party with Rose, Blanche, I mean, for being the hussy of the group, I mean, I never thought she was like super attractive. And it's not that, it wasn't the age thing. I mean, my number one celebrity crush is, I think, maybe 70 years old now. So nothing to do with that.
Did you know, it's funny you say about Blanche not seeming like, the typical sort of like sex pot.
Oh, she was like 50 years old, supposed to be in that show? Or
well, they originally cast Betty White as Blanche because
she
played
yeah. I remember that.
Sue Ann on Mary Tyler Moore, and they were like, "Oh, it's kind of like your character where you're going to be like man crazy," and she was like, No, I already did that."
I don't think
so. She's like, "I'd like to play the dumb character."
I don't think Rue McClanahan could have pulled off Rose the same. But mixing and matching now, if they ever like, I saw this goofy meme online that they were going to reboot it or something, but it turned out to be a fake. Like the Golden Girls and the Goonies, leave them alone.
The Goonies? What a random add-in.
No, I saw this rumor of a Goonies reboot too. Leave the 80s classics alone. Come up with new stuff.
But if we had that attitude, we wouldn't have a young Sheldon. Like, it's not a reboot, but
that's not a reboot.
A prequel.
You can do a sequel to the Goonies if you want, with the gang grown up and Mike's kid or Data's kid. That's fine. Just don't give me like a new Mike and a new Data and a new Chunk.
I had to squint at my list to see who my number 4 was. But it also goes back to the 80s. It was a show that my mother considered, in her word, too racy for me to watch. So I wasn't allowed to watch it till I was about 9 or so. But then I became a big fan of Cheers, and specifically Sam Malone.
Sam Malone, Mayday.
He, one of the first episodes I was allowed to watch, it contained one of the first dirty jokes that like I understood on network TV. It was like tame enough that I can like tell you what it is.
Okay.
And like tame enough that like the NBC censors in the 80s were like, okay, you can say that at 9:00 on a Thursday. But it was like dirty enough that when I was 9, I was like, he means sex. It's a joke because obviously Sam was a big womanizer.
A little bit, yeah.
So he walks into the bar. It might have been the cold open to the episode. And Woody Harrelson's behind the bar. And he's like, hey, Sam, how was your weekend? And Sam's got a beautiful woman on his arm. He's like, oh, I just spent the entire weekend up in Martha's Vineyard. And he turns and goes, hey, I'll see you later, Martha. That's remarkably dirty for 80s network television.
Yeah, it is. And I applaud you for picking it up at 9.
Well, I was the youngest of, 2 older brothers. I was a quick learner.
Yeah.
You hear a lot of dirty jokes.
Cheers was one of that might have been the first show my wife and I binged on like DVD. Like, for Christmas, you'd get like these old TV episodes. This was pre-streaming and all that stuff. And we still have the Cheers collection. Sam Malone, absolute solid number 4. So now, like getting into my top 3, I think my top 4 interchangeable. I think number 3 is more recent. I think he was the star of the show. The show really wasn't centered around him until he made it centered around him because of the way he was written. I think the show was more about Ted, but I'm going to go with Barney Stinson.
I have to, I liked that show until I didn't, like most of America.
I liked it up until the last season, where so Barney was written as another womanizer, and right. he and Robin got together, and I thought to myself, this is a good arc for his character where he's getting out of the womanizing. They spent an entire season getting them together. And then in 12 seconds into the first episode of their final season, they split up. And that set that whole series down a path of, what are you doing? But from a character standpoint, I mean, his mannerisms, his catchphrases, the playbook, the championship belt, his love of William Zabka, like, awesome stuff, man.
My issue with Barney is that he was like the classic sitcom womanizer stereotype. But the other characters were always like, oh, Barney's gross. Like for the first 3 or 4 seasons, they were like, oh, this idiot, but we'll be friends with him anyway. But you can almost call it the Fonzie syndrome, where Happy Days had to center all they were like, we have this popular character. How are we not going to?
That's what I'm saying. I think they wanted to make it about Ted, but Barney became Barney because of how he was written. I like the Fonzie comp. That's right.
But then it became like, it's almost like the show said, no, Barney's been right the whole time. It's cool to like trick women into sleeping with you and to have a playbook. And we weren't making fun of this bro all along. We were really secretly aligned with him. And I was like, oh, that's kind of gross. I don't like this this stopped being funny once we said Barney's right. You know? I don't even have to look at my list for my top 3. My number 3 is an obscure pick, maybe. And I don't know what is wrong with me, that it seems to be a theme that I'm picking people who died well before their time, because it was a character played by Phil Hartman on an obscure 90s NBC sitcom called News Radio, starring, you and I were fans of Kids in the Hall. It was starring Dave Foley from Kids in the Hall. Pre-podcast Joe Rogan, Andy Dick, great stacked cast. But Bill McNeil was like, if you watched the Mary Tyler Moore Show, I don't know if you did, like how Ted Knight was like this like over-the-top, supercilious, arrogant guy. That was Bill McNeil, only much funnier. And Ted Knight was very funny in Mary Tyler Moore, but Bill McNeil, there's just this like, all right, what we're going to have to do is you're going to have to watch all 5 seasons of News Radio.
I mean, so I will say, not knowing anything about the show, I love Phil Hartman as an actor. So
yeah, he's also my favorite all-time SNL cast member.
I wouldn't not. I doubt I would not enjoy it if that's like a triple negative, or I don't know, whatever. Not knowing anything about the show, you said Phil Hartman. Yeah, I'm in, because why not?
Yeah, just he had this way of delivering like these like very hammy, over the top lines in that great Phil Hartman baritone, and it was one of the most reliable laugh machines on TV in the 90s.
Did someone say sassy?
Oh, Phil Hartman.
Oh yeah, seriously. So my number 2, maybe a show you've seen. I don't know. I didn't watch it live. It was one of the ones that my wife and I were like, well, we need a show to watch, so we'll stream this because it was recommended to us. And he became the meme of the show, or the big name of the show, played by Nick Offerman. And he was the head of Parks and Recreation on the show Parks and Rec. I'm going to go Ron Swanson.
Great choice. I had, when we talked about honorable mentions, I had a different Parks and Rec character in my honorable mentions, but I'm a big Parks and Rec fan. I love that Ron Swanson is like, when they were like creating that show and they were like, well, we want to like kind of satirize like how mundane like small town bureaucracy can be, but also how stupid. He's based on a real guy who's like a real town. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Who's like a libertarian who's like, I don't think government should exist.
And he works for the government.
And also, it seems like such a bad idea for a comic character to be like, no, he believes in small government. Hilarious. No, it actually is. If you have a talented writer's room like Parks and Rec did.
Yeah. And a guy who could deliver it, not only his tone, his facial expressions were so dry. I like that kind of dry humor. Like the video I'll see all the time on TikTok is when he and Aubrey Plaza are at the supermarket, and the guy's offering him vegan bacon. He's like, yes, he likes some, and he just throws it right away. And he's like, another, please.
The one it makes me think of when it was the first time that Jean Ralphio appears on the show.
Oh,
and
God,
it's because Tom's trying to find a personal assistant for Ron. And so Tom's idea is to bring Jean Ralphio in. And so after a disastrous job interview, and Ron Swanson just goes, Tom, I want to punch you in the face so bad right now.
Those two characters could not have been further apart on whatever comic spectrum there was, because John Ralphio was so flamboyant, and Ron Swanson was the so Swanson number two.
My number two, I know I've said this before, that I have a weakness for like lying, scheming characters. The example I've given in the past was Daffy Duck being my favorite cartoon character as a kid. And this is a character who is almost like a live action Daffy Duck on one of my favorite shows. It's George Costanza from Seinfeld. It's not a lie if you believe it.
If you believe it, yeah. I know Seinfeld's one of your favorite shows. I was wondering how many Seinfeld characters have actually made the list. George, I think he's got something that a lot of us can relate to, in that, you know, all of us fall down on our luck sometimes. He just seems to fall down on his luck all the time. And the one episode, or the thing about George that will stick out to me, was opposite George. He's like, I'm just going to do the opposite of what I would normally do, and everything starts turning up well for him. It's amazing.
I also love, and I didn't appreciate it as a teenager, obviously, but as an adult, there's something very relatable about this guy who has these deep misgivings about his own intelligence. He's like, he enters a book club and he's like, no, I have to disturb this family to watch Breakfast at Tiffany's with them rather than read the novella. You know, he's a guy who lucks into a job at the Yankees and seems to have no idea what his job entails.
And no one else does either.
Right. He just kind of exists to, you know, sit in his office. He is as close to a perfect sitcom character as there is for my money.
And Jason Alexander also gives me hope that one day I can still be an actor, because he is not overly attractive. He is not fit. He is not tall.
Beautiful singing voice. He was a Tony winner for Broadway Bound. That's what got him the audition for Seinfeld.
I have a moderately adequate singing voice. I think I'm probably a little better looking than Jason Alexander, though. So we balance out. So someday I'm waiting for you, or I have a buddy named Chewy, like, write a pilot and let's go to Hollywood.
So I have to write the pilot, but then I have to hire you onto my writing staff?
Well, no,
without even a spec script?
No, I don't need to write with you. Shucks, you're a better writer than I am. I just want to be I don't have to be the lead guy. Just get me on the show.
Max is like, I want to be a producer.
Number two actor. I got it. Nobody wants to produce. So my number one, and this was a first thought I had. The very first thought I had. And when you started going through your list, my fear was, oh my gosh, he's gonna pick this guy, because you went with the show Cheers. I think Sam Malone is a fine character, but I'm going to go with the comic foil behind the bar. My favorite sitcom character was always Coach.
I love Coach.
So, and when he died, the memorial or just the nod they had, like at the end, like just moving his picture, like I get goosebumps thinking about it, because he was so beloved on that set. Like, Colasanto was just a really great guy, and he's just there. He's happy, and I don't want to call him dumb, but he was dumb, and it was nice to be. He cared, and man, I just liked Coach. Coach he's my number one.
And I think it adds to the performance that especially people of our generation don't really know of anything else Nicholas Colasanto did.
Absolutely.
I only really know of him otherwise as being the mob guy in Raging Bull before Cheers came on. But otherwise, he's just Coach. He's just Ernie. Truly one of the stupidest characters on TV in the 80s, but in the most endearing way.
Endearing's that's a good word for it. And I'm looking at his filmography, like Tony Como in Raging Bull, but a lot of other stuff that, Fat City, Family Plot, The Manchu Eagle Murder, Caper Mystery.
Fat City's a great movie, actually.
Sure.
Great old boxing movie with Stacy Keach.
Ah, okay. The Counterfeit Killer. So he doesn't have a lot of credits, and on TV it was Cheers and a show called The Streets of San Francisco.
I'm curious because I want to say what my honorable mentions are, so I'm curious what yours were real quick.
Oh, my honorable mentions. Really quickly, number 8 was a guy I think everyone needs in their life, George Feeney.
Oh, sure.
Number 7 was it was a sitcom, but it really wasn't a network sitcom. So Jim Brockmire.
Oh yeah,
that was
unexpected.
Great show, great character. Oh my gosh, and then a network guy that when my wife and I started watching Scrubs, Dr. Perry Cox.
Awesome. I love Scrubs. My honorable mentions, I'll run through quick. I'm a big Leslie Knope fan. Talk about Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Reverend Jim from Taxi, Christopher Lloyd. Another show I watched reruns of as a kid. Dwight Schrute from The Office.
I stayed away from The Office because I thought that I didn't, but yeah, Schrute, he grew on you. The first couple of years of Schrute, you're like, I couldn't stand working with this guy. I'd punch him.
I felt like the writers got it exactly right for Northeastern Pennsylvania. We went to school with guys like Dwight Schrute, like guys who are nerds, but also like think they're like paramilitary experts.
Ninjas,
yeah. And then Frank Reynolds from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Okay.
But my number 1, I think it's interesting that we both went with endearing buffoons. And I was actually afraid we would overlap. I went Homer Simpson.
Yeah, Homer, Homer's like a bell curve to me. Like he got progressively good, and then he plateaued for like I want to say 7 or 8 seasons of like he was there. I think he's just almost been around too long. I mean, The Simpsons have been going on now for 36 years? 30.
I think it's 35th season.
It feels like a lot, and it's hard for anybody to maintain that level of. Yeah, absolutely. If we did this list when I was in college, I think Homer would have been number 1. Norm and I actually got into an argument about Homer Simpson versus Al Bundy as number 1. I'm like, how is this even a contest? It's Homer all day.
Yeah, Normie. Come on, bud.
No argument at all.
Yeah, Homer just, and I haven't watched The Simpsons much since.
It's college. Been a while for me.
Like, it's a show that premiered when I was in 5th grade, and I'm now 45. So it's hard to be a Simpsons completist.
That's what I'm saying. Back in the day of DVDs, they had a thing where like each DVD season would come in a plastic shell of a character. Like they ran out of characters. Homer as a character, if I had to, we should almost come up with our favorite Simpsons characters. That might be a list down the road. So I'll stop talking. Catchphrase wise though, and just lovable dummy. This will get you in the feels because I saw this video and it reminded me of my daughter. Maggie's first word, and he's carrying her to bed, and he's like, once people start talking, they don't shut up. Maggie, I hope you never say a word. And he leaves, and she pulls out the sucker and says, "Daddy."
And do you know who they got to do the voice
of Homer Simpson?
No, for Maggie's first word.
Maggie. No, not off the top of my head.
Elizabeth Taylor.
No,
They threw money at her and said, "No, you just have one line and it's just one word. It's the baby's first word."
That's amazing. Yeah. So there it is. There's our top 5. We'll put those out, and you're gonna have to email me because I didn't write them down.
Okay.
I like that. That's we didn't have any overlaps this week, which I think that's rare.
It's the first time.
So this is obviously the best show we've ever done because of that. So we'll keep it up, and the Mr. Smarty Pants segment. We're going back to a fan thrown in question, and I think the list is. I think you're going to get the list, and to the point where we're going to time you on the list. You don't have all kinds of time. So
all right.
The first question, though, question-wise, it's dealing with Major League Baseball, and the question comes in from our friend Jake from Northeastern Pennsylvania again. He wanted to know, Mr. Smarty Pants, and these I had to reframe the wording a little bit because it was somewhat confusing. Which starting pitcher threw the most perfect innings in a Major League Baseball game only to eventually lose that game?
Harvey Haddix.
Yeah, without even – there it is, Mr. Smarty Pants.
From the Pirates, yeah.
Back in 1959. Do you know how many innings he threw?
11, was it? 12?
He threw 12, and then they lost.
I knew they went to extras, and then they lost it.
They lost in the 13th. My first thought, it wasn't perfect, I don't think, but what was it Jack Morris in the 90 World Series?
91
World Series. And I don't know if it was just shutout innings then, but yeah, Harvey Haddix, perfect. 12 innings, they lost the game.
I thought it was going to be most innings in a season because I was going to say Oral Hershiser when he had 59 consecutive scoreless innings.
Scoreless. I remember it was Andy Hawkins. I think the Yankees he lost a no-hitter to Chicago 4-0.
Yeah.
But yeah, they weren't perfect. So, and like when I read the wording, I'm like, how do you have a perfect game and lose? That's impossible. But it was he lost a perfect game later. I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Do you know who allowed the unearned runs to score against the Yankees playing out of position by a bad managerial decision by Stump Merrill? Jim Leyritz ended up in left, and some Chicago winds blew through Comiskey, and he misplayed a fly ball that just started rolling through the outfield.
There was a game in the late 90s. Oh, now I got to think of the guy's name because he was always – whenever he came up, it was always like in a big spot. Now, he was well loved in the clubhouse, but he was not well loved by me. And I have to go back and look him up because his name isn't popping out to me right away, which is probably a good thing. So I'm going to go to the 2000 Yankee roster, and I'm sure when I see it, it's going to pop out to me.
Like a middle reliever?
No. A bench player.
Oh, okay. Would come up.
So it's not. He wasn't around in 2000. Was he around in 99? Or was it later, like 2003 or 2004?
Ricky Leday?
No. He was an infielder. Oh, this is gonna kill me. You know how you felt with the first, like the Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely.
There it is. Enrique Wilson played in 2001.
That's a name I haven't thought of in forever.
They had him out in right field, and I there's not too many times I could legitimately say that Joe Torre would have been better off putting me in that spot. Because Enrique Wilson made 3 errors in right. That was a pretty good defensive player. I don't think I make 3 errors. He grounded into 4 double plays. I strike out 4 times. You get 4 extra outs because of my strikeouts. Yeah, that was the worst game I think I've ever seen. But yeah, so there it is, Harvey Haddix. So if you think you can stump Mr. Smarty Pants, think again. Send us your questions.
Sorry, Jake.
We'll let's see here. Let's get the Hit the caption down there, Soup and Meatballs 2187 at Gmail, or pop it in the chat. If you're watching this not live, stump him. Do your best. So I'm gonna try. I do some list stuff here, and then we're gonna go to the NFL. And again, because I think this requires a timer, I'm going to give you 1 minute.
Okay.
1 minute on the clock. Once I'm done saying the question, I'm going to hit start. You ready?
I'm ready.
I'm
leaning forward. I'm so ready.
The total number of correct answers is 7.
Okay.
Total number is 7. How many United States can you name that have 2 NFL teams? Go.
Well, I can name all 50 states. So New York, California.
I'll give you California. I'll give you New York. It's not New York.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. So
but they're New York.
Florida,
yes. 30 seconds.
Well, Pennsylvania.
I was waiting. I was worried there for a second.
Well, I was going in alphabetical order. Should I just name the 50 states?
10. You can do it in 10 seconds.
Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York. So New Jersey's one of them. Damn it.
And you just missed it. So New Jersey was the one that would have given you the Giants and the Jets. Right. The New York Jets and New York Jets. I'll give you that one. The 3 that you missed. And one of them is just downright mean. So one of them, Texas.
Sure.
You have the Cowboys and the Texans.
Right at the end of the alphabet, too.
One of them is hard. Again, it's before Pennsylvania in the alphabet, but you don't think of Cincinnati as being in Ohio to go along with Cleveland. And then this one's the unfair one. Maryland.
Oh, yeah.
Because the Commanders may be called the Washington Commanders, but they play in Maryland.
Yeah, they play in Andover, right?
Yeah. So there it is. I mean, 3 out of 7, but you were timed. So there's a little bit of a stress fracture. This was the injury episode.
Yeah, sticking with themes.
A stress factor to that. And because of that, and try to unstress you a little bit, I have a birthday surprise for you today.
Another one?
Yes. Now, you didn't know about this, and nobody knew about this except for me yesterday, because that's when I came up with the idea.
Kind of what a surprise is. But
there's a new segment on Soup and Meatballs, and it's special for you. Well, I'm going to call it Rank Roulette.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do, and so you can do that. We can go back and forth because I'm not Mr. Smarty Pants whatsoever. So like you asking me trivia would be like absolutely the most boring 2 minutes of my silence ever. But the Rank Roulette we can go both ways on. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a category. And then one at a time, I'm going to give you something in that category, and you've got a list, blind ranking, where you would put that on your list. And then we'll show the list at the end, and you'll see how well you did.
Can I just say, I saw some video where they had Trey Wingo do this, and I almost texted you. I was like, we should do some like blind rankings.
Well, here it is. Happy birthday to Tim. Today, we're going to rank, or in fact, you are going to rank one at a time, what you think the most exciting things in sports for you to see.
Okay.
Some of these may have happened. Others may have not. Others I'm not sure of. I don't know. Okay. So the first thing, ranking 1 through 5, because there's 5 things here. Number 1, where would you rank seeing anyone in particular, on the Boston Red Sox hit 4 home runs in a single game?
Oh, I'm going to go with a conservative play. I'll say 4th.
You're going to go 4th. Okay. The next one I came up with, a last-second field goal by the Eagles when they're down by 2, irregardless of game. Yes, I said the word irregardless. Get over it. Maybe not a playoff game. A regular season game, they're down by 2, last second field goal.
I'll go 5 because that's more common.
Gotcha. Okay, next one. And this one, I was trying to think of things that might be exciting for some people. A breakaway opportunity in a tied NHL Stanley Cup Finals game with 10 seconds left.
2.
And this one will be interesting. So you got 1 and 3.
Yep.
The next one on my list, any perfect game in baseball.
1.
Number 1. So which means you're going to put this number 3. I had an NBA buzzer beater for the Celtics to win a playoff game.
I feel very good about these rankings.
So here's your list. Number 1, perfect game. 2, a breakaway, 10 seconds left in an NHL Stanley Cup Finals. Number 3, the buzzer beater for the Celtics winning a playoff game. Red Sox hitting 4 home runs in a game. And Eagles win on a last-second field goal.
Yeah, I think if I'd been given that like ahead of time and said rank these, I think I still would have gone with those 5 rankings.
You got them all. You feel good? Then if you feel good, then I feel good. Then that's
happy birthday to me.
My birthday surprise to my co-host here. We should do that.
And belated happy birthday to Mrs. Meatballs.
Yeah.
Which is what I'm going to call her from now on. So, sorry, Jen.
That's as good a name as I think you can get. That's good. So we got a little new stuff going on in this week's episode, and easily our best show ever.
I think our best one yet until Travis Kelce comes on.
Until we get our first guest on, I'd be interested to hear. Like we wondered about some of my dad's old football injuries. That give us something to talk about down the line. But yeah, but an NFL day today. Good
1
day
hour till kickoff.
What's that?
1 hour till kickoff. Yeah,
so go get some soup. I've already, amazingly enough, I'm sure you're surprised, I've eaten half of the meatball sub today. It was my dinner last night. Didn't eat it all, so I had my meatball this morning.
I don't know what I'm going to eat. It might be soup because of my belly, my poor belly.
Not the cupcakes yet.
I'm going to save that for later, and then I'm going to eat a problematic amount.
If they require refrigeration, make sure you refrigerate them because
I have the icing in the fridge.
There you go. Oh, so you actually had to do. Yeah. So the transport was that would have been an issue. And you're lucky. Roseanne had volunteered to make them because I volunteered at first, and my wife was like, "Do you know how to bake?" You know what my words were? How hard can it be?
It's actually not. I really enjoy baking.
If you follow,
you just have to follow directions.
But it's just like the guy from Moneyball said. How hard is it to learn first base? It's incredibly hard.
Incredibly hard. That's Ron Washington, former Rangers manager.
So, for me, it might have been incredibly hard, but
baking is your playing first base.
Well,
you're no Gil Hodges.
You pay me $375,000 a year to try it. I will certainly try it.
Well, I think that was fantastic. I almost called it television because I'm so old.
It's what it is. We're live on the YouTube, and for those of you who tune in after the fact, we thank you for the views and all that happy stuff. Get in touch with us. Let us know what you want us to talk about, because otherwise you're just going to hear us blather on about our own personal injuries and what TV shows we like, which is kind of what the show is all about anyway. Yeah,
it would have been what hanging out with us in the 90s would have been like anyway.
Without the Granada or the Wendy's double cheeseburgers.
or the complimentary ice with every broken ankle.
Yes.
This promotion's not as popular as you thought it would be.
No, not at all. Well, Tim, have a good week. We'll we'll catch up. Hopefully Saturday. We'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And for those of you watching at home, we thank you, and we'll see you again next week or so. So for Tim, I'm Max. Insert witty catchphrase to close out the show.